You don't have to think in order to do things. It's not necessary. Unless you think you are independent and on your own, and that it's your job to be the authorizer of things and to make things happen, because if you don't, nothing will happen. Or if you don't establish order, chaos will reign just because. You don't have to think that way. You don't have to think at all. In order to be meaningful. In order to be an agent for change. In order to be a presence that triggers sudden shifts of perception in others. Let's go to the book. Can you imagine this? God is as dependent on you as you are on Him. Dependency, is one of those dirty words. You want to be independent. You want to be self-sufficient. You do not want to have to lean on anyone. And above all, you don't want anyone to lean on you. But God is as dependent on you as you are on Him. Well, God is absolute. Therefore, if God is dependent, His dependency, His state of dependency, must also be absolute. It's not variable, it's not temporary. It's just the way things are. The capital W way things, capital A, are. God is as dependent on you as you are on Him, because His autonomy encompasses yours and is therefore incomplete without it. Well, we've been using the word autonomy. What does it mean? That which is autonomous is something which is not affected by anything outside itself. It is something which is not subject to anything outside itself. Well, I think that's what omnipotence means. And I think that's what omnipresence means. That which has no outside to it is infinite and is all, and is therefore a singularity, is therefore pure, without a single element of anything unlike itself, and therefore incapable of embodying polarities. Something which is therefore eternal. God is autonomous, and His autonomy encompasses yours. Oh, God has autonomy and you have autonomy? No, there's only one thing going on. There simply is only one thing going on. God. And it looks like this. 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 And it looks like the flower. The daisy will always be the daisy. It won't be the daisy one moment and the chrysanthemum the next moment. It's purely what it is, forever. Now listen to this. You can only establish your autonomy by identifying with Him, God, and fulfilling your function as it exists in truth. In other words, you cannot establish your autonomy by acting at odds with God, by making up your own rules, by saying this is what a thing is instead of what it really is, and forcing everybody else to look at it and agree with you that it is what you say it is. Autonomy isn't gained by you or embodied by you by your exertion of force to make people and watermelons be the way you want them to be. You gain your autonomy, you establish your autonomy by letting the watermelon be the way God made it. And bringing curiosity into play so that you're willing to sit down and be intimate with that watermelon the way God is being it, and inviting the clear, uncluttered, undistorted, conscious experience of what it divinely is in the absence of all the definitions you have made up about it. You can only establish your autonomy by ceasing to try to independently be creative. In other words, by disidentifying from your concept of yourself and identifying with Him, God. God, what am I? God, I'm sick and tired of the struggle of trying to be something on my own. It isn't working. And no matter how hard I've tried, it never has worked. What am I as your self-expression? Please illuminate me with the clear experience of you being all there is to me. I've heard about that, but I need the experience. And I'm willing, to the best of my ability, not to defend myself against the experience. And then be willing to stand at the edge of the void because you don't know what the experience is going to be like or what it is. And persist in standing there with a constant invitation, not a constant coercion, but a constant willingness to let it register with you, knowing that it is bound to register with you because you, unconscious of who you are, is not what you were created to be. You can only establish your autonomy by identifying with Him, the Father, and fulfilling your function as it exists in truth. What is your function? To not inhibit or distort or alter in any way by a personal act of will what God is being right there where you are. It's called glorifying God. You see, we've talked about it before, glorifying God. It isn't singing hosannas to God. It's not what it is you not objecting to and not inhibiting the presence of God in you as you from being all there is where you are, because you have abandoned your personal private attempts to introduce something new into the picture. That's what glorifying God is. And in letting that happen, whoa, does it just mean God's the great one? And that you'll disappear? No. But you know what? You'll know what being the presence of God presencing Himself means. And you will feel your divinity and your wholeness and your fulfillment. Because, for lack of better words, you're letting what God is be reflected in you as you. And you will find that you have become part of the conscious movement of creation. Not alongside the Father, but with and as the Father. That is the best way I can put it into words at the moment. Your fulfillment comes from letting what you were created to be what is right there where you are, instead of your trying to create what you are. All by your little orphan lonesome. Now, the ego, this neat little self-sufficient, separate bugger that you all think you are, believes that to accomplish its goal is happiness. You know, man, I'm going to make something out of myself, and it's going to make me happy. And I'm going to show everybody else. And you know what? When I'm somebody, I may even help other people become somebodies. The ego believes that to accomplish its goal is happiness. And what is its goal? Autonomy. In the ego's case, autonomy means uniquely and specifically different from everything else. That isn't the definition of autonomy that I just described a few minutes ago. And it thinks that accomplishing that is happiness. But in spite of that, and aside from that, it has given you to know that God's function is yours. And happiness cannot be found apart from your joint will. Oh, you mean I get to God's will and my will, the two of us get to merge our wills and do something jointly, willfully, but jointly in cooperation? No. Your happiness cannot be found apart from your, I'm going to put it this way, joined will. Meaning, not independent any longer. where you're not holding yourself apart, but you're letting God in, and you're letting yourself into God. And you're saying, I do not want to maintain the boundary anymore. I do not want to maintain my divorce from my Father, my source, any longer. I wish to not hold myself aloof. I wish to not hold myself separate. I want, I long, I desire to experience togetherness. I wish not to be alone. Your happiness cannot be found apart from your willingness to let something else in and to let yourself into something else. Recognize only that the ego's goal, which you have pursued quite diligently, has merely brought you fear. And it becomes difficult to maintain that fear is happiness. Again, recognize only that the ego's goal, which you have pursued quite diligently, has merely brought you fear. Recognize that. And it becomes difficult, as a result of the recognition of that, to maintain that fear is happiness. Now, the simple fact is that as long as you have divorced yourself, separated yourself from God, your Father, your source, the ground of your being, you will be uncomfortable. You will be ill at ease because you are attempting to be at odds with what you are. And that constitutes a dissonance, an uncomfortable dissonance, a dissonance that constitutes a warning. Something a little bit more intense than a highway sign that gives you a little bit of information. It's something that lets you know that what you're attempting to do, you can't accomplish, and attempting to accomplish it because it constitutes a state of self-denial is not sane, is not wise, can only be fraught with confusion and dynamics that it's not your nature or your birthright to be experiencing. And it will be uncomfortable enough that you will not be able to deny it completely. And so, although you minimize it, you don't deny it. And this little quirky, trippy, sleight of hand comes into play that says, my purpose is to overcome this fear, and I have the capacity to do it. But the dissonance that you're experiencing is saying, don't try to overcome the dissonance. Stop doing what's causing it. You may do it as long as you wish, but it will be constantly uncomfortable. And the more intently you engage in doing it, the more uncomfortable it will become. Because the harder you push against your divine self, the more profoundly your divine self, which can't successfully be denied, lets its presence be known. Its unyieldingness presents itself. And so the harder you hit the immovable object, the more uncomfortable your fist is going to be. Your ego state of mind says, there must be a way for me to develop my hand so that it will become like a jackhammer and be able to make its way through this immovable object, you see. And so you devote yourself to that which will not correct the problem. What will correct the problem is neglecting to any further employ your will to accomplish something that can't be done, and return to the willingness to embrace yourself as what you are, which is the Son of God, the offspring of God, the manifestation of God. And mind you, the manifestation of God is not something different from God. The manifestation of God is God. Which means that as you all sit here in your varying degrees of a, let's say, a physical definition of yourself, you are the ultimate. Not being any form of a physicalness of self. Not any form of the definition, the faulty definitions that you've made up because you've had lack of real information about what you are. And everything you see that you've been called physicalness is spirit. Recognizably being in a manner that identifies God's creative self-expression. And there isn't any matter to it, but there is the manifestation of God. Again, recognize only that the ego's goal, which you have pursued quite diligently, has merely brought you fear, and it becomes difficult to maintain that fear is happiness. You're not so insane that you would continue to maintain that fear is happiness once you see what it is. Upheld by fear, this is what the ego would have you believe. Yet God's Son, you, is not insane and cannot believe it. And you want to know something? None of you do believe it. But you're playing with imagining it. And you're playing with the fun of imagination. You're employing it for all it's worth, or have been. You're exploring it to its depths. But you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be listening to me if somewhere along the line you hadn't gotten tired of it and wanted to find your way back home, wanted to find your way back into your right mind. God's Son is not insane and cannot believe it. Let him but recognize it, and he will not accept it. For only the insane would choose fear in place of love. And only the insane could believe that love can be gained by attack. Okay, well, let's use some other words. Only the insane could believe that love can be gained by enforcing orderliness on your world. See, that sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? Sounds constructive. But it is attack because you are attempting to bring order where the harmony of being pre-existed this imaginative project of yours. To bring order by your own hand and by your own will. But the sane know that only attack could produce fear, from which the love of God completely protects them. All of you, to one degree or another, are beginning to recognize that only attack could produce fear. And as a result of that, you are being able to look at yourselves and begin to notice where you're employing separation, divisiveness, self-protection at the cost of your peace and joy and at the cost of the peace and joy of everyone and everything around you. And so you're in a position to begin to change your behavior. With what can only seem like a promise to you at the moment, that the love of God completely protects you from. The sane know that only attack could produce fear, from which the love of God completely protects you. I've changed the words a bit. So, you have a promise presented to you because you don't see it fully yet. And the promise is that when you abandon self-protection, the love of God will uncover to you the fact that you don't need protection because you are not separate from your Father, and you and your Father not willing in a proactive way to be separate in any way constitute a singularity, autonomy itself, which is utterly pure, omnipresent, eternal, unfragmented, and without opposition in any part of it. That's the promise that you are given when you are encouraged to return to your right mind and abandon this great ethic you have engaged in to prove your independent existence. The love of God does protect you, similarly to the fact that your peace protects you from jealousy, anger, fear, all of the emotions that debilitate you. Your peace is ever present with you because it is the context of your very being. And when you move into it, you find anything opposite to you to be nowhere to be found. You're protected, you could say. But you're protected because in the unity, the indivisibility of your very being right here today, you are not vulnerable because there is nothing unlike you present.